Good afternoon, everyone. Hopefully you can see me over this big podium. My name is Karina Llanes. I am the CHCI Google Public Policy Fellow. As a Chicana who studied creative writing and has watched several forms of media become a tool for storytelling, community care, and advocacy, I am delighted to be with you today for the breakout session entitled Power to the Youth, Latino Youth in New Media. First, on behalf of CHCI, I would like to thank Amazon, the Walt Disney Company, SiriusXM/Pandora, Netflix for their generous support of this session. In this session, we will explore how, from social media to video games, Latinos as a demographic over-index on their use of technology and new media consumption, and with 1 out of every 4 Americans under 18 identifying as Latino, much of that enthusiasm is fueled by young Latino users and creators. We will hear from a panel of distinguished experts who are tackling this very issue, but first we will hear from our sponsor speaker. But before we jump right into that discussion, it is now my honor to introduce the session chair for this panel, Mayor Eric Adams. Mayor Eric Leroy Adams is an American politician and former law enforcement officer serving as the 110th mayor of New York City since January 1st, 2022. He gave voice to a diverse coalition of working families in all 5 boroughs and is leading the fight to bring back New York City's economy, reduce inequality, improve public safety, and build a stronger, healthier city that delivers for all New Yorkers. The mayor is currently on his way and will provide his remarks when he is here. Meanwhile, we will hear from our sponsor speaker, Christian Martillo, Senior Creative Director at Audible.
Good afternoon. Well, I get stuff done at Audible, so just like the mayor, we have that in common. So my name is Christian Martillo, and I am the Senior Creative Director for some of the biggest English and marketing campaigns at Audible, who puts out, into the world some of the biggest titles that our celebrity narrators have. So they put this Latino in charge of that. So it's a pretty good accomplishment for our company who's trying to improve its diversity. I am a proud Ecuadorian American, born and raised in Chilltown. That's right, I saw you before. But Chilltown is also known as the great city of Jersey City, New Jersey. I've been an artist and a creative since the 1st grade. And then I refined my skills at the School of Visual Arts in New York City. I took my hands on creativity and then used the technology of that day, not the social media and all that stuff you guys see today, but before then, computers was really new to an actual artistic, painterly type of creative. So I took that medium and then brought my point of view to it, which is a unique point of view, which we all have in common in this room, which is our Latino, Latina, and Latinx heritage, which brings us a unique voice. I've been doing that for 30 years. I've been having fun, getting paid for my point of view, so I encourage that to all our youth and Latinos creators that are out there. I'm also a co-founder and co-lead of the internal Latino, Latina, Latinx, Latina also, there's so many letters you add now these days, impact group at Audible called Unidos. A group is organized to influence the day-to-day business of Audible, the product, the content, and more importantly, to influence the lives of the internal population that identify as Latino, Latina, Latinx within Audible. In that organization, we're also reaching out to our community beyond the walls of Audible. We do a lot of programs and activate caring through the footprint of the Audible headquarters found in Newark, New Jersey. Being a part of an amazing company like Audible, which is considered the home of storytelling, where during Hispanic Heritage Month, our unique stories are being told in a program called Hear My Story, where we have content creators, narrators with our unique point of view, and we're offering that and curating that content for our members. The internal mission of Audible seeks that next generation of storytellers and creators in new media. Audible is a proud sponsor of this conversation, and it recognizes that our Latino, Latina, Latinx point of view is the future of unique and incredible stories. Just like me in the day, a whole generation of Latino, Latinx youth are waiting to be inspired and empowered to use today's technology and today's media and tomorrow's to shape all of our futures. So thank you, listen, and enjoy the important conversation that we have to offer. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian. Now we welcome Mayor Adams to the stage.
Thank you. Good to see you all. Good to be here in Washington. Such an important topic. I think out of all the topics that's going to be discussed, this is probably the most important one. Think about it for a moment, just using my campaign as a case study. It was clear that it was just a concerted effort of, at any cost, we can't let Eric be mayor. He didn't fit the product. He didn't go to the schools that we like. He didn't do the things that we wanted to do. He was bald-headed. And you saw the other day, New York Times did a front page story above the fold. They didn't talk about the fact I have dyslexia screening for all of our children, so 30% of our inmates won't be dyslexic. They didn't talk about what I was doing about foster care children for the first time, putting money into fair futures so our children won't age out at 21 and end up on the street, but have life coaches until they're 26. They didn't talk about what I did around child care, increase earned income tax credit, health care. They didn't talk about any of that. You know what they talked about? Eric like going out, hanging out at night. Above the fold, top story, front page, all the news that's fit to print. But what you're doing a cosmic shift. If you do an analysis of who voted for me to become mayor, it was not the Times readers. It came from Washington Heights, South Jamaica, Queens, came from the AAPI community. It came from a different product. People say you could never win citywide if you didn't have what was called the brownstone belt. I did. Because we use non-traditional media. I'm the first mayor that has Jose on my team who is handling my ethnic media. We were spending hundreds of millions of dollars without going speaking directly to the people on the ground. You're now going to be able to have a cosmic shift that people don't have to use the traditional methods to allow people to define us as individuals. You know how powerful that is? No one wants to write about a guy that was dyslexic all the way through school. No one wants to write about a guy that should be who he should be because he was arrested, because he lived on the verge of homelessness. That is not the narrative that people want to read. But your people who listen to you now, they look at me, dyslexic, arrested, rejected. Now I'm elected, I'm the mayor. Because of the methods that you use. So now you need to pick your targets and go to dismantle all of these things that traditionally we had to wait for traditional media to define us. sitting in their little rooms, trying to understand why we do what we do and how we do it through their prisms. You're shattering those prisms. I'm so excited about this moment. You are now going to create the city not based on their interpretation, no more middleman, direct-to-consumer marketing. That's a game changer in the media. I don't care where you go. No matter where you go, the first thing someone does when they take over territory, they take over the media. You can't take over the media anymore. You direct-to-consumer marketing. You're going to get a different product now. This is the most important aspect. Look how you've been defined in the media all these years. You're asking the question, well, why we have no Hispanic leadership on a state, city, or federal level? Look how they defined you. You're going to shatter that. Use the tool for empowerment. Somewhere in some school, there's a young dyslexic Jose, Pedro, Maria. Based on how you reach them, they're going to go from where they are to who they ought to be. They're going to realize their power. And you have that power. Let's use it.
Thank you. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Mayor Adams, for sharing your story. Now let's begin our conversation. To facilitate this panel, we are delighted to have Gio Moriano as our moderator for this session. Gio Moriano is a writer, editor, and creative marketing strategist passionate about telling purpose-driven stories. With deep expertise in digital technologies and personal finance, Gio covers how the world's most innovative companies use technology to shape the future. For nearly a decade, he held prominent roles at CNBC, serving as the network's lead analyst and a financial journalist for CNBC Pro, developing premium content for a global audience. His work has been featured on CNBC, MSNBC, Yahoo Finance, Bankrate, and other leading publications. Throughout his career, Gio has been a champion for diversity and inclusion, using content to empower and inspire underserved communities to reach their goals. Please welcome our moderator, Gio Moriano.
Thank you. And with me today, I have an amazing panel. And I would love for you to do a brief introduction. I'll start with ladies first. So Claudia, if you don't mind.
Sure. And everyone can hear me, right? Just making sure. Oh, kind of. Let's see. How about now? Yes? Yeah. Perfect. Okay. Oh, I hear myself. Perfect. So hi, everyone. My name is Claudia Odo, and I work for Pandora SiriusXM. I am currently in the brand and consumer marketing team specializing in Latinx audiences. It's actually a role that I wrote for the company 2 years ago, so I'm in month 5. And oh, thank you. Thank you. But not so unfamiliar face to Pandora SiriusXM. I'm almost 4 years with the company where I've been able to be in diverse roles within the org. I am, well, my mom, she's from Peru. My dad is from Italy. They met in Venezuela. And then they moved to Brooklyn, where, me and my brother were born and raised. And yeah, I think this panel is super important to our SiriusXM parent brand company because we have very intentional efforts throughout employee experience, marketing, and just ways to gather and have more talent internally that we're really excited to be here and talk more about it.
We're excited to have you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Rafael, would you like to go next?
Sure. Mic check. All right, good. Thank you, Gio. So I'm Rafael Garcia, Vice President of Live Action Series Development for Disney Branded Television. We develop content for both Disney Channel and for Disney Plus. And essentially what that means is that we're in the front lines of creative talent acquisition. So it's writers, producers, directors, with a goal of finding our next big series. When I first began my career many moons ago, the word inclusion was rarely heard, if at all. So But it's good to know that, now terms like DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, are ubiquitous at companies like Disney and at other media companies as well. So that gives me hope, and thank you for having me here today. Thank you.
Thank you. And last but not least, we have Pete also. So excited to have you, Pete.
Hi, everyone. I'm Pete Corona. Thank you for having me. I oversee drama series at Netflix. I've been there for almost 4 years next week by way of Marvel Studios, so former Disney person as well. I buy, produce, and launch new shows on Netflix. Up to this point, in my 4 years, I've launched 16 series. So some of those shows were subsequent series, most recently Resident Evil. And I have a lot of fun and exciting things in development that hopefully will bring us into the new story age of our community and showing us in new lights and new perspectives and more aspirational roles than we've seen ourselves in the past. So I'm excited at what the future holds, and y'all are going to be the ones that are changing it, because it's truly what the mayor was saying. We're dismantling old systems that weren't built for us and building them for the future.
Wonderful. Thank you, Pete. And we'll get into how we'll dismantle these legacy systems in a minute. But before that, I would like to start the conversation with a theme that's central to this event, and that is equipping young Latinos and Latinas with the knowledge they need to achieve their dreams. And what better way to do that than to learn from your personal experiences? So you've all had a fascinating careers, right, in media. But we all know that breaking into the industry is very, very difficult. I was at CNBC for almost a decade, and I basically found this job because I think it's like by the grace of God, almost, not exaggeration. And when I found myself there, I was one of a handful of people who look like me. So I would love to hear from you about how you basically made it into the media industry. So maybe we'll start with Rafael.
Sure. It's always a circuitous path for all of us, I'm sure. But for me, I'm from New York City, Washington Heights. My parents are Dominican and Puerto Rican immigrants. And as a kid, I used to love to read comic books. That was my first foray into the Disney world before it was part of Disney. And eventually, I went to college to study journalism. I wanted to be a writer. And so I interned at multiple places, and I interned at Comedy Central in press relations, where I learned to write press releases, deal with media, and it was great. But then while I was there, I got to know the creative executives, and they started sharing scripts with me, and I had never seen a script before, right? And I think one of the ones I read was South Park, maybe. It's been a while, but it was like an early script. And my mind was blown. I was like, I want to do this. I don't know what it means. I don't know how I do it, but this is where I want to be. So at that point, I shifted all my energy into trying to break into television. So I continued interning at other companies, including Nickelodeon, VH1, all of the Viacom companies, because they were in the Times Square area. So eventually, after I graduated, I became a production assistant in Miami. And I'm not from Miami. I had never been to Miami, but I flew to Miami. And for those that have been there, I was basically skateboarding up and down Lincoln Road, delivering coffee and carrying tapes. Like, that was my job. But it was the best job I ever had because I was in television. So I moved back to New York City, and then I got hired by Nickelodeon through my contacts, through my internships, to work in scripted. And that's how I learned really what the jobs were, what the departments were. Like, my world was opened. I was there for a few years. Then I wanted to move to LA because this is kind of where the action is for the most part. So I left Nickelodeon to work for Cartoon Network. And there I got to develop animation. I got to work in unscripted, some live action. It was a great job. And then I was planning to get married at that point. I got engaged. But then Disney came calling, so I put off my engagement. My wife was very upset, my fiance. And I began my new job at Disney, and I've been there for 10 years now. So at Disney, I began in current series, which is a department that essentially shepherds series once they're up and running. And then I shifted to development, which again is acquiring shows and talent. Then of course, Disney acquired Disney Plus, right? Now we took on that. So my department then was charged with developing content for Disney Plus. So along with developing for kids, now we develop 4-quadrant programming for Disney Plus. Thinking back, I think the hardest part in entertainment is, I think, getting on the carousel. I tell this to all of my assistants, all my interns. Like, once you're on the carousel, I think you're good, because now you're in the game, and you can maybe leave, you can stay on, now you have options. But that is the very hardest part. And the challenges for me early on were really economic, right? It was like, how do you intern? How do you go to school? How do you work and help your parents? Because most people who come from certain socioeconomic backgrounds don't have the luxury of just, I can go and do stuff, right? So I had to balance real life with my dreams, which I sometimes didn't feel realistic. Fortunately, my parents were very supportive. They didn't understand what I was doing. They didn't get it at all. They were like, what are you doing? You're delivering coffee and tapes. Why don't you get a job? Like, Carlos Juan, he'll hook you up, man. You can work at the pharmacy. And I'm like, no, I want to do this thing, So that was a challenging part, but they were very supportive, and I'm grateful. So again, I think it's about networking. My internships paid off. It's about meeting people, and it's about being persistent and really sacrificing, because I did have to sacrifice a lot of time and effort, especially early on, to get on the carousel.
Thank you for that. And it's that being nimble and being flexible. And when you want something, you are going to do it, but you have to persevere. And things are not always going to come easy. So thank you for sharing this story. Claudia?
Yeah, no, I love that. Thanks for sharing that. And I love how you actually went back a bit to your childhood to kind of talk about the origin of it. And I know for myself, I grew up in a not so diverse neighborhood in Brooklyn, being one of the only mixed families on the block. There was stories I can tell for days, a lot of undertones of, racial slurs and so forth. And I do remember my mother telling me, Claudia, you wouldn't want to speak Spanish to me in public. And that was my first language. But as a child, you would kind of see what was going on around you. You would pick up on these cues, and you knew it just wasn't so embraced to be Latino, to be Hispanic. And so I can truly remember the time when, you had obviously Selena, you had Ricky Martin coming, but then the most impactful song was Gasolina. You can laugh, but Gasolina was that one song that everybody in my middle school was like, wait, you know what this means? Can you please translate this? The kids, the people that maybe once made fun of you for your culture, were now embracing your culture. We're now singing this. And I mean, it wasn't the easiest song to translate, but it was a moment that you can see how much Latin music was already starting to make that impact in our society and our culture, and the zeitgeist shift that you were seeing. So not that I'm saying I realized my dreams at 8th grade, but as my career progressed, I went into this program called the T. Howard Foundationship, and it was a couple of different interviews and interview questionnaires, and I was able to interview for our talent for the HBO company, where I worked on HBO Latino, HBO Multicultural, and HBO College. And that was my first taste of entertainment, and the first taste that I could see there were these multicultural roles, because at the end of the day, I just wanted to find a way to find more representation for my culture and my community. So that really was the first, path that I was able to take, and I'm so thankful for it, because being first gen, my parents didn't go to college, they didn't have connections, they didn't know people at companies. trainees. And so it was because of this T. Howard program that I was on, and there was only 2 slots for that HBO, section for the T. Howard intern program, that I was able to really get my foot in the door. And then from there, it was networking. It was joining organizations like NAMIC. It was, staying in touch with people and having coffees and so forth. And so that's only continued to grow. And it's at events like these that I've made those connections. So it's, that first gen story that I know a lot of us share, but it's the passion, it's your family who's instilled those values in you. All of that is what really helps get you, in the door. So
I love that, and knowing yourself, right?
Yes.
Like I think growing up in an Italian neighborhood and feeling like the one person who does not have an Italian name. I shared with you earlier, like my family moved to Middle Village, which is a very Italian area. So my cousins' names are like Gina, Louis, Andy, right? The pressure to fit in. They didn't know what else to do. Like, let's name our kids, let's give them Italian names.
Right.
But it's actually finding yourself and knowing who you are and what you stand for. And then people see that beauty in you, and then the rest is just up to you, right? So Pete, what about you?
My similar stories. I think early on I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I was voracious with media. I went to Blockbuster, and that just dates me, a lot with my dad, and he rented things on the weekend for me. I went to the movies with my grandfather and my mom, and I would watch PBS and British comedies with my grandmother, and anything that was media or entertainment based was for me. And so I didn't know exactly how to articulate like what this box was, or like how to be part of it, other than actor or director, the sort of like buzzy words that everybody knows. And we were in East San Jose, so like not a very like wealthy part of San Jose. And so I was the first person in my family to go to school as well. So it was a lot of navigating waters, just based off, drafting off of like more successful people that I saw in the neighborhood, or people that were part of my class where their family would take them, and take SAT classes. So then I would buy the same books that they would do and then study that. And so that same sort of like can-do attitude is like what I hope everybody would apply to like their career, and even in college, whether or not it was related to entertainment, I would read every single entertainment book that I could get my hands on from the library, or that I could buy and return. And so I had internships at Universal, and then internships at this one production company that allowed me to answer phones and basically act as a third assistant, which is sort of illegal now because it was unpaid. But it gave me the opportunity to learn what management was, and it was always my plan to work at a management company, work at a production company, work at a network, work on the ground on a production. And so my first job was actually in PR, because that was the first job that was offered to me. And for a lot of us, you have to take that first job, right? Or else you have to move home, and that wasn't an option. And so I mentioned this in the previous panel, but I worked at Equinox, it was a gym right in the middle of all the agencies where I wanted to work. It was like the sexiest place where everyone was getting the jobs. And so I thought, if I am working in PR and then I work at Equinox, I could be tangentially related, or maybe run into some agents and then slowly sell them on me. And so that's how I got my first job at an agency, was meeting agents while giving them towels, like for working out. So very humble, but always with my eye on that ball. And so I had worked at a CAA, which is one of the top talent agencies at the time, and then worked on A&E's first scripted series called The Cleaner, with Benjamin Bratt, who is a lovely human being. So I saw what a showrunner does, which is essentially a senior writer who oversees the room, assigns episodes to writers, and then is the conduit for the network and the studio. And that went for 2 seasons. So I worked on set for 2 years with David. And then I went to A&E because I had developed a really good relationship with the senior vice president of drama at the time, Tana Jameson. who is still a mentor to this day, and something that's so important when you find someone who has a little bit of interest in you, really take that and foster it. And I know it's really expensive to network, because you can't always go out for drinks or coffee or for those things. Just ask for someone's time. Like that. I think that's just the most important thing is time. You don't always have to spend money. As time is more important than anything. And so I worked subsequently for a British production company for many years, and then found myself at Marvel after a very long 3-month interview process, working on their horror slate and introducing Ghost Rider, which was played by Gabe Luna, the first Latino superhero for Marvel live action. And then subsequently was poached by Netflix. And so I've been there ever since. And that's sort of the short of it. But in between that is a lot of lean years where I didn't have a job, and things where, I had to take other jobs maybe that were obliquely related to entertainment, like PAing and doing car commercials on the weekends just to pay the bills, but always knowing that I needed to stay in that city and in this function because television was the one thing that I wanted to do. So although the resume looks like a clean, nice piece of paper, there's a lot of gaps in there, and there's a lot of start-stops. So don't let those start-stops stop you, because you never know what the next opportunity could be.
So true. Oftentimes we only see the price, but we don't see all the work that went into getting there, right? So I love how you mentioned that can-do attitude that you need to have, and I think that's really critical for any industry, but specifically for the media industry, where you just have to go in, roll up your sleeves, and do what needs to get done. And also the curiosity component, that you have to constantly learn about new technologies. You constantly need to be reading, so you can't lose that. Even all of you, I'm sure you can relate to that. You're now in like really good positions, but you're still learning all the time, right? Something that I wanna talk about is networking, which is so powerful. And I think we learn English, we learn math, but we don't really learn so much about networking. So we'd love to hear about you, how you go about networking. I think often it's even about mustering the courage to ask someone for coffee, right? In my culture, you're very, you don't really rock the boat, right? So for me, it was something I had to learn, that, wow, I can actually reach out to someone who I don't know, and now they're like willing to speak with me. Like, it was amazing. But again, like, I would love to hear about how you go about networking, building those relationships, maintaining those relationships that are critical for your career, especially in media. Rafael?
Sure. Yes, networking is key. As mentioned earlier, joining organizations is really important. When I first moved to LA, I didn't know anybody, and I joined an organization called Color Entertainment, and it's for diverse executives in media. And that was a game changer for me, because I got to meet other diverse executives with shared experiences and challenges, right? I've been a member, again, for over 10 years now. I'm now on the board of the organization, and we hold mixers, seminars, we hold trainings for up-and-coming executives. We have an assistance group, we have a film group. So I think that is invaluable, is finding the others like you at a minimum, right? Because that's where those bonds are formed. And to your point is, yes, if you meet somebody, people love to talk about themselves, right? Especially in entertainment, right? So if you tell somebody, hey, I just want to pick your brain for a second, whenever you have time, eventually they'll get back to you. It may take a while, because that's how it works in Hollywood. I've had lunches pushed for 2 years until they happen. But I wouldn't be afraid to approach somebody and, of course, politely say, hey, I just want to hear more about you and your story. And you'll be surprised how amenable people will be to that.
Great advice.
No,
Yeah.
that's true. I kind of echo that. It's definitely joining organizations. And so I mentioned earlier that was T. Howard for me. And that became, post my internship, they had an alumni program and they would have mixers and they would introduce you to their network. And then I joined NAMIC, which was, in New York. They had a conference every year. I would volunteer as just an event helper. And I would just be at these panels, meet these people, connect with them after on LinkedIn. Yes, it would be a coffee sometimes, but sometimes now during the pandemic, I can share myself. Like I've hopped on Zoom with complete strangers who have reached out to me on LinkedIn because they just wanted to hear more about the industry and about my role. And I think it's giving back the time that people gave you when you were, starting your career is so important. So I think that's a big aspect of it. And, maintaining those relationships and having it done in a very organic way. I saw this article, I thought of you, and I sent that over to people I've connected with in the past. Or, just checking in how you are, happy holidays, how's the family? There's certain personal key points that we're all just here to help each other out, and we're all just human at the end of the day. So just kind of establishing those very organic relationships is something that, is beautiful to watch blossom. And then you just cultivate those, and yeah, we're all here for each other, so.
I love that sense of community.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can't say anything that has already been said. Absolutely join organizations that are related to the industry that you want to be in. Volunteer at events just like this. It gives you direct access to the people that you want to be near. And I love what you said is it's part of curiosity, right? It's like if you see something that you want and you find articles, like you find something that person's interested in and reach out in a new way and to get their attention. And so I think something like that, I love that, and finding new ways to approach people and other than just like can I have 5 minutes of your time, which is also valid and should work.
I would just add, also networking with each other earlier in your careers. Some of my best friends in this industry, people that I met decades ago, and now some of them have these mega jobs, right? So I think really networking with each other as you build your careers, because you'll forge those true friendships kind of forged in the struggle, and those are really the best relationships to have.
I think that's the key. I think sometimes when we want something, it can feel a little transactional, right? But if you approach it from a personal level, from the relationship component, it changes the dynamics, right? Because now it's just us communicating, and I want to help you too. But it's about like nurturing those relationships, keeping in touch, and generally caring about people. And I think that then just so much better, right? Mm-hmm. So thank you for that. Now I would like to direct the conversation to the importance of representation in media. And on the topic of diversity, the Latino community is one of the most vibrant and diverse groups in the US. So this question is for you, Claudia. As a multicultural brand expert, how do you approach this conversation with clients? And can you share the importance of addressing ethnicity, race, nationality, gender identity, and so forth in the media?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And, having originally come from the sales side on the Pandora SiriusXM media side, I would have to work with different clients. It's the Pepsis of the world, it's the Coca-Colas of the world, and they would kind of come to us and say, how can we reach this Latinx audience? And so the way that we would kind of walk them through is through storytelling and through a narrative. So we would obviously hit the main points of, do you know we're 19% of the population? Do you know by 2024 we're going to have 1.7 trillion spending power? Do you know that this is the youngest audience and it's only growing and we will be the largest minority by 2027? So you hit them with the numbers first. So when you have numbers, people really listen and their ears perk up. And I think that's the first aspect of it, but then it's also the cultural storytelling of it. It's, hey, we want to be having these campaigns, these moments for the culture all year long, because we are Latinos all year long. And so, yes, it's great to have a strategy, a campaign for Hispanic Heritage Month, but what are you doing the rest of the year? How can we help you connect? And I'm sorry, can you hear me? Yes, still hear me? Okay, perfect. How do we connect with this audience for the rest of the year? And what are these initiatives we can think of together? So we would work with them very closely to to come up with these strategies. And then now that I'm on the other side, on the Pandora brand marketing side, I make sure to implement all those learnings we would give our clients straight back to us, because we should be preaching, doing what we preach as well. As it comes for, when we get into the narratives, depending on the client and how much they've worked with this audience in the past, we can get a little deeper. So yes, there's the Hispanic, Latino audience, but this is such a diverse audience. It is so multi-layered. It's defined by nationality, it's defined by ethnicity, it's defined by gender, it's defined, by all of these layers, and so, and by race. And so that's that part of the narrative where we kind of dive into Latino, Latina, Latinx, Latine, Afro-Latinidad, indigenous roots. We talk about, the race. We really park there because we have seen a lot, on the Afro-Latino and indigenous Latino side, and there's not enough representation within the Latin media and campaigns we see now. So we like to park there and really dig in deep. So it's a conversation that I love to have. It continues to evolve. And I know we could probably have a whole hour discussion here about, why do we use Latinx versus Latine or Latino or Latina? And it's because it's really coming from the youth. I think that Latinx, if we would have a timeline, maybe within the last decade or so, you've seen that a lot more in brands and campaigns utilizing what is Latinx. And Latinx is that gender neutral term that we can refer to our entire community. And it's, taking away the gender construct of it. It's also, using it as a way of being an ally, because not only can you identify as a Latino or Latina, but you can also identify as Latinx and solidarity that challenges gender norms that we see within our culture. So when you look at who uses this, it's really Gen Z and millennials that are utilizing this term much more than maybe my mommy, who doesn't really, maybe understand these, or we're in different generations. Being bicultural, being bilingual, we have, set up this way as Latinos, a Latinx community, that we are living in two worlds. We're 100% American and we're 100% Latino, Latinx, and so we're blending our worlds. The way we see, progression happening here in the U.S., we're using pronouns, we're talking more. We're having all of these conversations to ensure that our LGBTQ plus community is being seen and heard. And so that's also why we're seeing it now on the Latinx side. It's a necessary term. It's not perfect. I know everyone has different opinions on it. I know that there's a lot of ways we can, again, talk a whole hour about it, but it's beautiful in its attempt of trying. And we see that it is only growing. And when you're a brand that wants to speak to that younger audience, that's what we say. We say, talk, using those terms, but also you don't even have to talk at us, just talk to us in culture and connect with us authentically throughout the year. So again, we can go there for a whole hour, I'm sure, and everyone has different opinions in the room, but it's beautiful.
And it is, and I think you touch upon the beauty that our community has, but everyone in our community is so complex, right? You can't put us in a box. So I love how you're teaching companies, you're showing them the benefits and the impact that it can have on their companies, on their brands, right? If you're marketing to me and you don't understand my culture, you don't understand trying to fit me in a box, you know what? You clearly don't get it, so you're not gonna get my business. So really good job in doing that. Anyone else has any comments on this? If not, we can move on to the next topic.
I would add just one last thing, which is one of the biggest, is hiring diverse talent.
Yes.
So I think that's something we also, when we're working with clients, it's, do you have the internal teams, or are you working with the right external teams to do that? So that's just something that I'd love to just underscore as well, as we talk about, all these multi-layered identities and how to speak to us, but it's also ensuring you have the right people in the room to speak and connect with us.
100%. And I think so many companies miss this, right? Because you can market to me if you don't have Hispanics, right? It can be just based on what you watch on a movie or you kind of know from your personal experience. You need to have the people who you're addressing, and they need to be able to say, actually, this is who I am, and this is how I feel, and this makes sense or not. But we know that that's not the case, right? Like I mentioned, where I worked, I think there were 5 Latinos in the entire company, and I was very young, and it felt wow, how did they choose me, you know? But that's another topic. Now I wanna talk about technology. So we live in an era where technology allows us to showcase our talents and creativity to the world. So I wanna know, how is technology, new creative and more resonant content and new media forms allowing us to change the narrative of Latino representation in media, right? We just heard from the mayor talk about how you don't need to go through the New York Times anymore to reach your audience. Now you can use social media or YouTube or different platforms. So I don't know, Pete, do you have an opinion on how technology is changing the narrative?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, as you know, like there isn't only a handful of places that are doing content, right? Like people are creating content on TikTok and Snapchat and YouTube. So you don't necessarily have to just sell to a major streamer or a broadcaster in order to be seen. And I think it's also an interesting platform to maybe test out ideas. And you could create your own podcast and or web series that lives outside of like all of these major sort of like streamers and broadcasters, and that could be a source of which you adapt then later pitch to something once it's matured. And so I think like in terms of that, like it's also free, right? I mean, well, free to put on services. It's not free to actually make, but you there is a lot of opportunity to make your own IP and then create that value with yourself. And then just applying to any like pipeline programs and really fostering that idea. And if you really are passionate about storytelling, then you don't have to just think that like Netflix is the only place, or Disney Plus or Warner or whatever it is. It's if you really want it, then you put it out into the world and see who listens and who hears.
I love that. And it's also a good way to showcase a potential employer, right? What you can do. You can say, here's a portfolio of the videos that I've done or whatever the creative medium it is. And I think it just brings it to that next level in my open doors. But we have time for some questions. If anybody, I see someone, please. What is your name? Bianca, okay.
Thank you. First off, Pete, your biopic is fire.
I had to finally rig down and get some for yeah.
But anyway, besides the point, I'm Bianca Hawk, and as you can tell by my surname, I'm a mixed Latina. So I appreciate Claudia bringing up, the diversity of the Latino community. And my question is, many of you have touched, I feel like all of us probably in this room have felt like the other in the room at some point. In those experiences where it might have been an intimidating experience to be the quote unquote only one in the room. Could you tell us about experiences where you turned your differences into strengths and capitalized on what made you unique in that space?
I could jump in. Yes, we touched upon this in the previous panel, and I think it's so important, right? Like there's so much power in being the only one, because all of our experiences are something that those people in the room don't have. So like that is so valuable. And so you already have a leg up on all of these people who probably have the same shared experience except for you. So like that's your superpower, and like sort of stepping into that and realizing like, yes, it may be scary and it may be daunting that to take up space, but because you were invited to that space, like take that space up and make sure you speak loud. And our community has always said like we work hard and keep our heads down, right? But I think we can work hard but keep our heads up and talk about our successes and talk about the things that we do, and not in an egotistical way, but in a very like celebratory way, right? Because there aren't a lot of us, and it's going to take all of us working together to hold the door open for other people. So when you're in that room by yourself, you should feel powerful, because nobody else has that access aside from you, and hopefully you'll give that access to somebody else.
Any comments?
Sure. Yeah. No. I love that answer. That's amazing. And I think, I mean, can I be honest? There's still times in the room that I am the only person, and I'm on Zoom, so you can't see my hand is shaking. But I still like move forward and share the opinions I have. That maybe it's an SVP in the room, and there's a content strategy at play, and there's nothing about multicultural being said or done in this said plan. So you have numbers that I utilize to kind of get everyone to pay attention, but it's also utilizing your experience. Coming from someone in the culture, this is what I feel we can do and what we could accomplish. So it's tying in the business and then sharing. Sometimes your personal narrative is what really gets people to also see the color of your story, and show the validity that you have and why you're in that room and why you're going to help them, achieve X, Y, and Z goal, but also just do something that's going to be amazing for the community. So I think it's pushing forward and speaking up, and it's still happening. I'm so thankful and grateful. I have old bosses and leaders that I still connect with to this day, and they are very honest with me. They're like, sometimes I'm the only one, Claudia, and I feel the exact same way, and I am the chief of staff. And so it's so comforting to hear that at any level we're going to have that, but we're all feeling the same, we're all pushing forward, and we're all here for each other. So.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I would just add that, we've all been there where you're the only in your department or in a meeting, but hopefully you aren't the only in your company, right? And at Disney, we have internal resource groups, volunteer resource groups for all groups, LGBTQ, Latinx, African American. So if you are the only in your department, seek out these other people in your company, maybe form your own resource group, right? So at least you have that camaraderie and support outside of your department, right? And I agree with Pete that the greatest power you have is to embrace your authentic self. And it took me years to do that, to be honest with you. At first, I was trying to impersonate what an executive should be like, because that's all I've been shown in the media growing up, right? It was either stereotypical or the Latinx person was in the background. So I'm like, well, where do I belong? Where do I fit in? But at one point it clicked, and I was like, this is who I am. And from then, I think things opened up for me.
That's wonderful. And I love how you're all shining samples of what it means to give back to the community. So I love that it's not just a concept, but they're here sharing their experience and their expertise with us. So that's amazing. And I hope that the next panel will be with some of you, when you're here and you're sharing your experiences and your expertise. And that's the power of community. That's the power of networking. That's the power of relationships. So I really want to thank you all for this amazing conversation, and to you guys for being here.
If you want to learn more about Disney's efforts at D&I, both internally and externally, in stats and numbers, go to Reimagine Tomorrow. Just search Reimagine Tomorrow Disney, it'll come up, and you'll find a ton of information as to our efforts when it comes to D&I.
At it, because we do have a handful of, well, more than a handful now, but just 6 programs particularly related to the Latinx community at Netflix. So go to jobs.netflix.com and see some of the programs that we have specifically geared towards us, and then just the community at large. So there's a lot there for people to check out.
Thank you. And likewise, I'd love to follow up. And I could provide the link. Our D&I team also has a couple insights about programs. We have an HBCU Pathways program that's a year long, from interning, to so forth, to kind of help the early start of the career. We have a couple other internship programs coming up in the summer and spring as well. So I will follow up with the link. And please reach out to me as well. I'm happy to connect with everyone and keep that conversation going as well, and tell you a little bit more about Pandora and SiriusXM as well.
Wonderful. Well, thanks again for everything you do.
Thank you.